Hi, my name's Lorne Epstein. I'm your host today on You're Hired. You're listening to 96.7 FM here in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the show. And today we are going to talk about generations. If you want to follow me, you can on Twitter at Lorne Epstein, or you can join us on our Facebook page at You're Hired Radio. And as always, if you have a show idea or want to be on the program, you can call me at 240-876-0276 or reach me by email at lorne@electriccow.com. We got a great show today on generations. You know, I think when my generation was coming up, it wasn't really that big a deal. People didn't talk about generations. But in the last 10 or 12 years, what are we talking about? We're talking about millennials. And we're talking about the silent generation, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, and this new batch of millennials, and how they all work together at work. It seems like all of a sudden now people are interested in how this works. I know for my generation, it wasn't a big deal, but I'm going to read some stuff here that I think is interesting to kick our conversation off. A core challenge over the next decade will be for companies to attract and retain a skilled workforce. As the labor market continues to tighten, technology continues to evolve, and fewer foreign student immigrants to America are coming for job opportunities. The situation is exacerbated by companies finding themselves managing these four generations of American workers. So we have the silent generation, which are people born between 1925 and 1946, the baby boomers between 46 and 64, and then my generation, the Gen Xers, between 65 and 1980, and then the millennials, which is born after 80. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but these are all kind of ballpark numbers. We've got some experts that'll probably give us some better idea on what those mean. So each group has its own distinct characteristics, values, cultures, and attitudes towards work based on its life experience. And to successfully integrate these generations into the workplace, your company, the company that you work for, is going to need to embrace radical changes in recruitment, benefits, creating a corporate culture that actively demonstrates a respect and an inclusion for its multi-generational workforce. So it's fascinating that we've never talked about this before, and I want to welcome our guests because we have some really wonderful and special guests. With me in studio is Joey Price, and Joey is the CEO of Jumpstart HR. He hosts a podcast on business, life, and coffee, and is an adjunct professor of graduate human resource studies at Stony Brook University. Most recently, Joey was recognized by the Society of Human Resource Management as one of the country's top 30 HR professionals under 30. Welcome to the show, Joey.
Lorne, it's great to be here.
Glad you can make it. And on the phone from Albuquerque, New Mexico, I have Dr. Robert DelCampo. And Dr. DelCampo is the executive director of the Innovation Academy and Rutledge Endowed Professor of Management at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. He has authored 7 books and written over 75 academic papers. He's also consulted for many Fortune 500 companies, including Ford, Home Depot, Dell, and Intel. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
And Robert is one of our resident experts on generations. I heard Robert speak twice on generations. He's very compelling. He has an interesting take on it, and I think one that will really bring some light to what we can do into the workplace. And also with me in studio, I've got my production assistant, Alex Pascasello. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Alex is 17.
I am.
He's our youngest member of the studio crew. And I brought him on the show that we'll bring him in later to kind of talk about what it's like to be a 17-year-old. And even though he's not working, although he does work for me, that maybe we can talk about that, working for an old guy. And then also on the phone, I have Nicole Wallace, graduated from University of Maryland and has been in the consumer products industry ever since 2007. During this time, she's worked for several large leading companies in her field. She now leads a team dedicated to providing insights and strategy to top retailers in the country. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you.
Glad you can make it. We'll be talking to Nicole in a little bit. So first, I wanted to start off with Dr. DelCampo. So talk to us overarching, based on what I said, what do you see employers needing to think about when it comes to these generational melting pots that we've now talked about in our culture?
Well, I mean, there's a ton of stuff for employers to think about, and thanks, Lorne, for having me. I think what employers need to consider is that we have these four generations working together for really the first time ever. And if you want to get really kind of, out there thinking about it, we're about to have a fifth generation move in, although we don't really know where these demarcation lines kind of are drawn, because, as you mentioned, it is kind of arbitrary, like, oh, so you're born in 1980, you're a Gen Xer, 81, you're not. Well, it has a lot more to do with how you were raised, what the sociocultural influences were, all of those sorts of things. But when you look at the history of our nation and of employment, especially over the past 8 to 10 years, the trends dictate that, especially with the uptick in our financial markets, that approximately 40% of workers will retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And if you look at the numbers of people in each of these generations, we don't have enough Gen Xers to take over for all those baby boomers. So who's going to fill that void? It's going to be these quote-unquote feared millennials that we have to throw into these areas. So turnover becomes a bigger issue. Theoretically, and not to go super academic on you guys, the folks we see leave organizations tend to be low performers because we manage them out or get creative in terms of our structures, or our high performers that have opportunities to leave and go elsewhere. So in theory, the folks that are staying in organizations are that middle range of employee, unless you have something else linking those individuals to the organization, which can be a variety of things that I'm sure you talk about on a weekly basis. But from a generational perspective, there's a lot of strife among these different groups, especially the closer the generations are together. So Xers and millennials are really kind of have a lot of strife in organizations. Generation Xers and baby boomers tend to, duke it out a bit. But the further apart they are, the less and more productive, less strife and more productive the relationships can be. So, I mean, that's just kind of a broad, brush to paint this with, but it's really going to be a huge crunch when you look at the next 5 to 10 years, succession planning, et cetera. How are you going to attract those top millennials into your organization to retain them for longer periods of time, knowing that they tend to be more transient in their work lives, and make sure that you have the most effective organization moving into the next, couple of decades?
That's interesting. So, Joey, tell us your kind of overarching impression of this new generational situation in the workplace.
Well, it's very fascinating that we have all of these generations working together. But my research has shown, and practically speaking with what I'm seeing in the workforce, is that really, whether you're a boomer, whether you're a Gen Xer, whether you're a millennial, whether you're the new generation, we all want the same things from the workforce. IBM has also done some groundbreaking research on the difference between millennials, and we're finding that the differences or disparities between what millennials want versus what older generations want, it's not as big a gap as we would think. And then going back to Dr. DelCampo's point about the new generations being ushered into the workforce, well, in 2020, the millennials are going to be 50% of the workforce, and by 2030, we're going to be 73% of the global workforce. So, like it or not, millennials are coming, and we're here to survive and advance in the workplace. And it would behoove your organization to learn how to adopt. And what I'll talk about today are some of the 5 phases of employee development for the different millennials, and what you can do in your organization to make sure that you've got the attractive workplace for the millennials.
So you cited some research that at IBM. What was it they were saying?
Sure. So there's a few myths that have come into place regarding millennials. And one of them is that millennials are more likely to jump ship if a job doesn't fulfill their passions. Well, when you compare across millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers, only 42%, 47%, and 42% respectively of millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers are actually considering jumping. So there's only a change of 5% between each of the generations. Another myth
as far as leaving because they don't feel satisfied.
Exactly. Yeah. So the disparity is only 5% when you look across.
So the other 50 some odd percent are just slackers.
The other 50%, they're there for the paycheck. And and then there's another myth that millennials, unlike older colleagues, can't make a decision without first inviting everyone to weigh in. Millennials are often downplayed as a collaborative generation, and we can't make a decision unless everyone buys in. But really, it's only 56% of those that believe in soliciting a lot of opinions versus 64% of Gen Xers and 49% of baby boomers. So millennials are actually right in the middle when it comes to needing consensus to make a decision.
So it's interesting. I was at University of Maryland, and folks listening to the show know that I've been in talent acquisition, and I was recruiting for a company, and we were there listening to Dr. J, who was the head of the career services at University of Maryland, and she was talking to us. This is like 9 years ago, about millennials. I think this is the first time I'd heard the word millennials. But her whole point of view is that we have to be treating them special. And I frankly thought it was a lot of crap.
Yeah.
Because nobody treated me special. So I was born in 65. And when I got to the workplace, the older folks were like, pick up the slack, do the job, or we're going to berate you and make you feel bad or fire you. There was no coddling in any of my jobs ever. And so, and a lot of folks are like me, we're like this middle generation, right? We're not the big boomers. We're not this millennial thing. We're just kind of like, so we're just like the housekeepers, And honestly, I don't feel compelled, to do anything special for you, right? I mean, it just doesn't compel me. So, and I don't know if we're starting with the end in mind, but compel me to care, because I don't care. I mean, you're going to have to work someplace. And if you don't want to work for me, fine, I'll find somebody else who wants to work for me. I got a good job. It's a good paying job, good benefits. Why do I care to have to cater to you? And Robert, I'm going to start with you on this, because I think it's what's on a lot of people's minds.
Sure. I think you bring up a good point, and that's, the pretty, not to bag on you, but it's a pretty typical approach, right? And I wasn't treated special. Why should you be special, et cetera, et cetera? But I think Joey brought up some good points as well, is that, a lot of the tactics, at least that, and I'll bring them up as we continue our discussion to retain millennials and attract them, et cetera, aren't anything earth-shattering. Millennials aren't necessarily looking for anything different. They just come back to basic good management practices, right? But what happens is when people get kind of crazy about, we have 40% of the workforce retiring and millennials have different work ethics and, some of the myths that we just brought up, that stuff goes out the window. But if we just go back to that, that's really, those things have been researched and people have been, spouting them as gospel for years and years and years because they actually work. So when we talk about millennials, we're really just talking about making a workplace that demonstrates value for individuals, that allows them, a path forward, that provides them development opportunities. No one likes to go to training, but everyone likes to go to development type things. All those sorts of things are really key. But from a numbers perspective, there's just not going to be as many quality individuals based on the population of the United States. Furthered by, the fewer foreign workers coming into the United States and the opportunities provided there. So if you want to get the top people, it's important to make sure that you're doing those things that value employees. Basic HR practices that, we've taught in survey HR classes for 50, 60 years.
So I'm going to reframe this. So forget about generations for a second. As far as how we're going to treat them, it seems like what you both are saying is that this new generation just wants us to stand tall and do the right thing, right, at work, have better workplaces. And I say that because I hire a lot of veterans, and when I go to veterans groups, and now because we've had these wars for the last 16 years, we have a lot of veterans. And a lot of them are looking for work. We did a show here on getting veterans jobs. And they're saying the same thing. They're like, look, employers, veterans want a mission, they want leadership, they want all these things. And I'm thinking like, wow, I'd like that too. Yep. And so, maybe these new, the millennials, in spite of what we may say that's pejorative, are here to kind of help us be better workers and be better at the workplace. Would that be the frame to look at this through?
Yeah, Lorne, I think you have to realize that millennials are growing up in an age where we can actually be, and I'll use the term, conscious consumers of the workplace. There are tons of studies, there are tons of thought leadership in place about what is an effective workplace. And so if we're being fed those things in the same venues as boomers and Gen X and Gen Y and Gen Z, if we're being fed all that information, we're just conscious of the fact of, okay, well, now I know what to expect in a workplace. And when I see something that's different than that, and I realize that I really resonate with what's being modeled and theoried and what I'm reading in all of the research studies, I have a problem with that. And I want to call out that problem because you should want that for yourself too. I mean, I've heard you say, I want leadership, I want direction, I want management. And what this millennials are being ragged on is that we're just exposing the gaps between good leadership, bad leadership. More importantly, good management, bad management. And the fact that many corporations, many companies out there actually exhibit bad management principles, and there's just a stodginess to actually even try to correct for the better.
Stodginess? Whoa, what country do you work in? All right, well, yeah, Robert, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, just think about, you said take out the generational frame, but let's throw it back in there. Think about millennials' sort of history and sort of what we talk about millennials. Very socially conscious, very engaged, wanting to make the world a better place, and have had those sort of thoughts, ideas, behaviors reinforced. You guys are in the D.C. area there. Think about the election of President Obama in 2008, very much driven by a grassroots movement, mostly by young people, that, the contemporaries were kind of saying like, oh, this guy doesn't have a chance, not a lot of experience. Millennials got behind this candidate and were able to move the needle. So they're kind of taking those same sort of ideas into the workplace and saying, look, we've got a little bit of power here. We can pick and choose, so we want to have a positive experience. Additionally, think about the formative years experience, like I talked about, what shaped these millennials' thoughts and attitudes and what was going on at that time. We saw the WorldCom, Enron, unscrupulous executives ruining people's retirements and opportunities of their aunts, uncles, parents who had worked for 20, 30, 40 years at the same company, and maybe they've got it figured out and said, look, I'm not going to stand for that and not let that happen. I want something more. Now they're in a position to really kind of affect change in that arena.
And also, just to add on top of that, Dr. DelCampo, was the fact that now we have workplaces where you're no longer handcuffed to your job in the sense that your retirement is a pension where you have to work for 20 years in order to get it. Your health care is only through the company that you work for. Your life insurance is through the company that you work for. All of these sort of handcuffs or anchors, benefits, yeah. Right? All of these benefits, to some degree, are portable. And that's why you're seeing a lot of freelancers starting their own companies, the entrepreneur generation, because you don't have to get those benefits at your workplace. You can get them other places. You can roll over your 401k to another organization if you weren't happy with the place you were before. So there are a lot of social climate factors to play into it, as Dr. DelCampo was saying. But also there are the tangible, practical things like, okay, well, what's my retirement? What is my health care? Those sorts of things.
So we're talking about the portability of benefits, which is interesting because, with the new ACA, that really kind of made it possible for people to afford insurance. I mean, I've owned my own insurance on and off through my career, and it gets more difficult as you get older. And it's also gotten more difficult. Just insurance companies are unwilling to take people. Mm-hmm. So there is some legislative stuff that needs to occur to kind of support this new generation, and perhaps all of us, in being more free, mm-hmm. right? A freedom of choice and freedom of where we stay, and not have to stay someplace because, well, where are we going to get benefits or we have a pension? That's a really good point. So we have a couple of younger folks with us, and I wanted to hear from them on what their thoughts are on how we're talking about their generation. So, Nicole, I wanted to hear from you, if you would be so kind, is to just chime in and tell us your thoughts. I'm, you don't have to tell me your exact age, but are you a millennial?
I am. I don't mind sharing. I'm 31, so I've been told. I still have to do the math at this point. 1985 and then add 31, so yeah. Okay,
and so what do you think about what Robert and Joey have been talking about? Like this notion of who you are as a generation. We're painting you.
I mean, it's interesting. I think the thing that resonated with me the most was in the beginning, I think, when Dr. DelCampo was talking about movement through organizations and just how, you've got your low performers who have been coached out, which, that's obviously still happening. And then you've got your middle folks who are kind of, achieving at a level of mediocrity. And then you've got your high performers who have opportunities. And that's me. I'm the high performer who's received several opportunities to switch gears. And one of the challenges that I just face, and I'm curious to hear thoughts from both folks, is, at what point does the movement begin to look like disloyalty? I've been in the workforce for about 10 or 11 years now, and I've worked for 4 companies. And, I'm continuing to look for opportunities to grow. And so, that 4 companies could become 5 companies very soon. And so, I just want to understand, is that the new norm? Is that going to be okay? Is it going to signify to people that, oh, hey, she's a high performer? Or is it going to say something else about my character?
Nicole, before we answer, I want to ask you a question. Did your parents work at the same place for a long period of time?
So my mom is actually, she's an honorary millennial in that sense because she seems to move every couple of years into a new role. So I saw that growing up. She was not one, and she was born, I won't say when she was born, but she is, I guess, part of the boomer or maybe X generation. My dad was, he worked for the Baltimore Sun for many, many years, and then he actually changed careers. So they're atypical in the sense that they didn't go one place and just stick around. Whereas if I look at my mother-in-law, she worked for the same place for 30 years.
Right. That's typical now. So my dad worked as a teacher for 30 years. I have had over 50 employers and I'm 51. I've been working since I was 15. So in 37 years, I've worked for about 50 different places. And the longest was about 3 years twice. So, my generation, and I've seen this as a recruiter, is that a lot of resumes, people are there for a year or 2 years. And a lot of managers who are like, well, I only want to see people who've been someplace forever. They're limiting their pool choice. So I don't think you are unique. And I think that the notion of loyalty went away. And it went away in the 90s when IBM had its first ever layoff. I think culturally, and Robert, you could probably talk about this too, that all of a sudden employment was not guaranteed even at what you would consider the most safest employees. Is that your experience, Robert?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, this mercenary we've always had a sort of mercenary mentality in sort of big business, but I think you're right when you talk about IBM starting to lay people off and, the whole blue suits, blue blazer, and, you go to work and it's this solid deal and you're going to have a, retirement plan has really gone away. Going to Joe's comment earlier that, the portability of benefits and, the movement away from pensions and, defined benefit plans, those sorts of things has really been key. I think, the point of having multiple employers and moving around is really kind of moot if you're a performer, right? I think you picked up on that as well, Nicole, when you're talking about it, is that performance trumps all else. If you can get it done, I think most of what U.S. employers are looking for is someone to come in and get it done. That's why we're moving to this more contingent workforce, entrepreneurial kind of sentiment where people, set up their own shop, hang their shingle, go in, do a project, and pop out, which causes a lot of issues from an organizational culture standpoint, but is pretty typical in the way people are really looking at work heading into the next decade.
The one thing I would say to Nicole is, and from my perspective, is that when I look at your resume, I think that that's fine, the number of positions you've had. I like to see people get a promotion. If you're a full-time employee and that's kind of the career track, if you've been someplace and you got a promotion and title, that always is appealing, right? Because then it makes me think that, well, you didn't get a promotion because you changed jobs. You got a promotion because the people that you worked with thought that you were worth promoting and that you performed well. But I can tell you that, most companies are getting better at interviewing, and we'll know if you're a top performer. And if we know that you're a top performer, we'll hire you.
I would agree with you, Lorne. If you're a top performer, I'll hire you. And the reason why is regardless of how many years you stayed on a position, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, the average these days is 3. I'm thinking about the team that you're going to be on, and you're going to come in and raise the bar. If I'm an employer, standing in the employer seat, you're going to come in and raise the bar. You're going to bring your best practices. You're going to bring the value and experiences that you've had over the years into our organization and help make it become X% better. And ideally, you'll come in, you'll raise the bar. And if you leave, if we're not able to retain you, we're that much better by having you on the staff.
So, Nicole, can I ask you, can you tell me what you think about your generation?
In terms of just generally speaking, or?
Yeah. We've said some kind of positive things, and, I think that there's probably some negative things that we could find.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it feels like we're the generation that's getting beat up after we after we were encouraged by our parents and by other people to be, great and the best that we can be. And I think from my perspective, and I'm by no means an expert other than, I've lived my life, is we've experienced a ton. We're, at least for me, I was in high school when 9/11 happened. We saw the election of the first Black president. We saw a lot of things, both good and bad, that shape who we are. And then in the midst of all that, we've kind of been, and this is, my opinion is we've been encouraged, we've been positive, and we've believed that we could change the world. And I think when you take people who think that they can change the world, the expectation is that we're going to be able to be successful. Now, for some of us, we understand that the hard work doesn't change and we've got to work. But for others, I do think there is some truth to the millennial lazy idea where, you can just change the world by sitting on your couch and willing it to happen, or maybe posting something on Facebook. So, as with any group of people, I think there are the best among us and the worst among us. And I think, that's the same for my generation. But I do think, like I said in the beginning, I think we get beat up a lot more than maybe we deserve. You guys didn't beat us up on this show, but, many times I do see a lot of things that, a lot of very negative things about millennials in general. And it hurts my feelings.
One of the things that, and I'm going to share, so not a dig on you, but a dig on your generation. I went back to my college about 8 years ago, and I spoke to some of my professors who had been there, and one of them was telling me, like, they have to start college for these kids in the summertime, and he gets parents, moms and dads, calling him saying, "Can you help my kid get a job? Or if you don't help my kid get a job, I'm gonna," and that my mom or dad would never have done that in a million years. They never would have called. But that kind of helicopter parenting, I think, is Robert, maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, we got them. I mean, it's, the helicopter parents are an interesting phenomenon, but I think it's a good point. And, and we can bag on millennials if you want. That's always an interesting, proposition.
Hey, watch it there. Watch it there, doctor.
Yeah.
But let's bag on their parents.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a staunch proponent of millennials, and the reason I try to be positive, I think, is because we do spend too much time being negative. I think the thing we have to remember about millennials is that previous generations have created what we've got, both positive and negative, in terms of how millennials operate in the workforce. And I try to be, a very strong advocate for millennials because I feel that they do get bagged on a bit too much, and that's something we can certainly go down that road if we need to. But we have to remember about social phenomena. What tend to happen with these helicopter parents and such is that the pendulum tends to go from one extreme to another rather than from one extreme to some sort of normalcy. So if you look at, Gen Xers, we had, dual income families, we have institutionalized childcare, all this stuff, and somewhat absent parents. So when we see that for our children, we tend to go the complete opposite way and become over-involved rather than, it's pretty typical of social phenomena, rather than coming to some level of normalcy. So, the folks who tend to bag on millennials the most really are the ones who are at fault for creating a lot of these values and ideals that they hold.
Yeah, so we'll start bagging on the boomers. They screwed up their kids.
The boomers and the Gen Xers to some extent.
Thanks a lot, boomers. Bunch of losers.
It's your fault.
So Alex Pascasello is our production assistant. I wanted to introduce him. He's been working with us for a while, and I got to say, and I wrote a recommendation for Alex, but he's definitely one of the better workers I've ever been around. I'm going to give an example. So when we first started, we were going to be doing news articles, and I wanted him to research a news article on the web, and I showed him the format of how I wanted it and what kind of news articles to research. And I think I gave him about 7 or 8 minutes of training, and boom, he got it. And within a day or two, he had found a bunch of articles. So I was really impressed. I can't say that's true for a lot of the people that have worked for me in the past at corporations. So, Alex, what do you think about all this generation business? I mean, you're young, you're not working full-time, but what do you see for yourself?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's definitely, I'm listening to it and I hear both sides very clearly. Going back on the parents thing, I kind of have a mixed parent strategy. So like my dad is less helicoptery and my mom is more helicoptery, and they kind of even out. So overall, my parents are fine. I would never imagine either of them doing what you described as calling a college and telling a professor that they have to find me a job, because that's obviously not the professor's job. The professor's job is to teach me so that I can find a job by myself. But either way, I think that the extremism like that is what kind of causes some problems. But at the other end, sometimes with the extremism comes the other end of the extremism, where people are not giving enough support. But for jobs, I mean, I haven't thought too much about jobs, but I definitely can see not necessarily staying at a company for a long time. And I also can, because both of my parents have worked where they worked. My mom at USAID and my dad at American University for quite some time. But at the same time, I have no idea if I'm going to go around and stay at companies or firms for a few years and then move on to a new one, or really just attempt to stay there and grow relationships with the company and with the people that are working there with me.
Mm-hmm. And I think your dad does have a little bit of helicopter. He did mention you should wear a hat to come today.
Did he really?
Yeah, he asked you if you wanted.
Well, maybe my mom's rubbing off on him.
So I want to kind of dig deep into, Robert, into some of the kind of the cross-dimensional aspects, what we should be looking at in the workplace as employees and employers to kind of bridge these gaps. Because you said something earlier. You said like the generations that are closer together fight more. They're more bickering.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a threat kind of thing, right? The Gen Xers are fighting against the millennials for sort of power in numbers and in influence. But what we generally see is, creating relationships in organizations being incredibly important. So, going back to that turnover concept, the way we keep good employees at organizations is we create linkages to the organization outside of just, you show up to work, here's your paycheck, that kind of thing, right? Whether it be benefits, whether it be creating relationships within the workplace, whether it be because, your spouse has a job or your kid's in a good school, something like that keeps them linked into the organization. We call them links. It's in the unfolding model of turnover. So what we can do is create relationships, and real relationships, not just, oh, hey, I'm going to help you do this, whatever task it is, but mentoring relationships between more seasoned employees and younger folks, maybe even skipping over that middle generation there, but that are mutually beneficial. I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about mentoring, but reverse mentoring being very powerful as well.
What's a reverse mentoring?
So the protege informing the more seasoned person, the mentor, in fact. So you're learning from each other, right? So this is how you can do your work more effectively by using, some sort of open source coding to collect all these articles that you were looking to do, or by using some new search engine, or by using an app that somebody found, right? So trying to bridge that technology gap or knowledge gap or whatever, so that both people feel valued in the relationship. It's not just the older person saying, well, this is how you learn to do the work in this place, and you're going to have to do 80 hours and that kind of thing.
Right.
So creating those sorts of relationships are very important.
So are there companies,
providing opportunity for
I have not seen any companies that are really focusing on mentorship. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but I have not seen them, because I kind of had mentors, but I definitely haven't since the beginning of my career.
Sure.
I think mentorship is something that your more progressive, the top 20%, the top tier of whatever age group, I think that's something that they necessarily take upon themselves proactively. So within an organization, you might not see a structured mentoring program. You'll just see the forward-thinking individuals within an organization that say, wow, I see this person and I want his job in 5-10 years. Let me learn from him or her and see what I need to do to make it to the next step.
Now, the problem with that is that if you have these informal relationships, that there could be legal hurdles, because an employee that works at the organization that's not getting that could take issue.
Sure.
That hey, this person's getting special attention and there's no policy for it. So that while that may be happening, that is a legal exposure. Robert, you were going to say something?
Oh no, I think Joanne said it exactly. That it's really the progressive, the top performing organizations are looking more toward these things, but it's also the responsibility of individuals to take that on. And if the organizational culture promotes that, you see it happening. So, like you said, I think there is some concern of exposure from a legal perspective. So, when people kind of take it on their own and say, hey, don't call it a mentorship, but hey, can we go grab a cup of coffee? Or how do you do this? Or how did you get to this particular position? and that sort of thing. That's those are those top performers that you really need to move to keep.
Yeah, and the reality is there is legal exposure there, but those sort of informal relationships happen all the time, whether it's within an organization or outside of it. People have mentors, have coaches. I've heard the term rabbi be used, where there's a senior individual within an organization who will bless an opportunity for the younger junior professional to move forward in an organization. And it's a culmination of the relationship that they have, but also the quality of the work that that person's been doing. And so one of the challenges of formalizing one of those arrangements is that senior leaderships or managements may say, well, we're spending all this time investing in our employees and doing the same for everyone. But my problem is, as the owner of the company, is that this takes more time away from work being done. And so I see that challenge being the case in many places that I go and speak with leaders about their management and improving their management. I think you should formalize these sort of things, but unfortunately, the resistance is it just takes too much time away from the work being done. And there isn't the foresight to see, if I invest in my employees, then they're going to have an X% greater return.
Right. So we're back to the whole management of command control structure, right? And what the millennials and other folks are looking for is to have a more integrated, more, multi-flow kind of, this is a collaborative. And there are organizations, co-ops in Spain called, I might be pronouncing this incorrectly, but the Madrigals or Madrigas, where they're large multi-billion-dollar cooperatives, and there's no power structure. And there's a lot of research now around how, and we'll be talking about this in another episode on bias, about how organizations where people have power, those people in power don't have empathy. And without empathy, they aren't good leaders. Mm-hmm. And so I think what the millennials and what kind of we're talking about is to bring a level of empathy into the workspace. Like, hey, you can't ignore us. We don't want to be ignored. We want to work someplace where we're contributing. And that although you may be my leader or my manager, I'm as valuable as you are in this game. What do you think about that, Robert?
Perfect. Nail right on the head. I think that's exactly what it is. And it can be from a variety of different perspectives. I mean, I see in undergraduate students, the projects they do in their classes. If I see another paper on, working at Google or Southwest Airlines, I think I'm going to have to punch someone in the face, because people want to be there because there's those unique extra steps that are taken to value the employee, right? It's at Google, we have free food and I can bring my dog to work and all these sorts of things, which are very small. And there's some problems with that culture of staying on the job all the time. But, it attracts millennials because it's an extra thing that is being done for the benefit and welfare of the employee. So, and that, that filters all the way up into management. So the culture really is something that sells those folks on wanting to be there. I
think you gave yourself away in the Generation Xer, because only our generation would say, I'd punch somebody in the face.
My generation might say, we'll tweet about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We grew up on too much of the 70s television. Well, so I wanted to get back to Nicole, because you had asked a really good question, and I think just to kind of complete that is that, how are employers going to look at you when you go out into the workplace and you've had these 4 places in 10 years? First of all, I think that's great. 2, just listening to you on the phone, and we've only spoken on the phone, I can tell that you have enough, you have the kind of, let's say, gumption and grit that would make me interested in interviewing you, right? You have that confidence. That's what's more important. Right, I can hear it, and people like me. I remember going to college once, and I do a lot of workshops on interview skills. And I was giving a workshop, and this one kid, a young college kid, was like, "Well, I'll just lie to them. I'll BS them." And I said, "No, you won't. I mean, you can, but we know." And I was going to say to him, "I'm not your mother or father who you could lie to and were being nice to you and didn't want to call you out on your lies. We know." Yeah. If you're listening to the show and you're young and you don't think people know that you're lying, we know. Yep. And so I think that Nicole, you have a real authentic way of communicating, and that your energy and your drive come through. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that you felt like, okay, you got clear in that night. Anyone else can chime in because everyone else heard you, but that's my sense.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? It's you need the talent in the organization at the end of the day. And I think, like you said, the over-reliance on sort of charm is something that will eventually be sort of ferreted out.
Is that a millennial characteristic, being charming?
No. I'm going through Mad Men for the second time, and charm is not just a Generation Y thing.
Okay. Well, you're listening to Your Hired Radio here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. Today we're talking about generations. Dr. DelCampo, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say, charm. People have been trying to use charm for hundreds of years, I think, as to push through the lack of skills. So it's not unique to millennials.
So what else can a business owner do to address some of these concerns? Like, what are some of the functional things? I'd like to hear from you, Robert, and then also from Joey to see what practical things can be put in place.
I mean, a real easy tactical solution, and I don't see why people do this more, is flipping job descriptions inside out. So not just, what's required of applicants for this particular job, but what you'll get out of this particular position. You do this job for 3 to 5 years, you'll get this sort of training, we'll send you to leadership development, you'll be eligible for this, and this, and this is where it's going to put you. So obviously there are requirements, you need a certain degree, certain amount of experience, and maybe certain certifications. But here's what you're going to get out of it. You set the expectations, make sure that there's a very solid psychological contract in place that you do X and you will be provided with, in addition to pay and benefits and such, Y, so that it's very clear to people. Millennials are very driven by a clear path forward, have definitely goals of achievement, etc. So why not contribute to that by identifying how they can move forward on their own sort of ladder of expectation?
That's a great piece of advice. Joey, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to drill down a little bit on what Dr. DelCampo is saying and introduce a model that I use. You've got to look at the employee life cycle in different phases. And so I think that there's 5 different phases. You've got the exploratory pre-hire, where regardless of their generation, this is someone from the outside of the organization looking in and saying, would I want to work for this company? Why would I want to? And what would my motivations be? So if you are looking to be a best-in-class employer, you need to be knowledgeable of the fact that people are researching your organization in that way. Next, you're going to have what I call the novice adapter, which is your entry-level employee, and you want to make sure that you cultivate those internal relationships and external professional development opportunities so that they're able to grow and see your organization as the reason why they're becoming a better employee. Then you have the comfortable contributor who is able to grow and actually add value independently and autonomously. And then your courageous influencer who's got a little bit more power and political influence within your organization, all the way up to the authority figure. And I think if managers can look at the life cycle of the employee, then you can better cultivate your relationships with employees at each of those phases and get more out of your investment in your employees.
So how would I do that? How would I, obviously the first part is self-explanatory, but
sure.
How do I take someone because I've been in a lot of work situations where there's someone who is courageous, right? That they really, know how to address leadership and that other people don't. How do I get that person into a leadership role?
Well, there are 4 building blocks. You want to make sure that they've got the right external professional development. So you're sending them to the leadership and management trainings that have a direct impact on their ability to do their job better, and not only do their job better, but become a manager of people and a manager of projects. You also want to have the internal mentorship and coaching, where maybe they have access to executives in the organization where they can have those coffee conversations and say, here are some stories from my career path, and this is what I did to move forward. Yes, you need to get this certification. No, you don't need that certification. Yes, you should get that degree. No, you shouldn't get that degree. Having those conversations, and here's how you politically deal with this person in the workplace, and then also there's clarity from the top. You want to make sure that your leader at the top of the organization is clear what the vision is of the organization, and that message trickles down with very high clarity, and that you can see that each level of management all the way to the entry-level employee have a great sense of where the company's going.
Yeah, I think that's missing in like every organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, one of my key takeaways here is that every company can improve. And if you look at just one actionable step you can take, then I think you can make your company X times better.
So are all these things in a web document?
Yeah. We've got
Okay,
a
so we'll
website.
post this up on our Mixcloud account.
Okay.
But I wanted to get back to Nicole. Nicole, you're still with us, right?
Yep, I'm still here.
Yeah. So did we answer your question and give you some good advice? Is there anything else that we can support you with? I know that you wanted to kind of get something addressed, and this is your moment.
Yeah, no, I think definitely. Excuse me. So, I like I said, I continue to look at job opportunities that will suit me, and I just want to make sure that as I'm, going into new opportunities, yes, I am delivering when I get into a role, but that it's not kind of slowly chipping away at the way that I appear externally to others. So I think I definitely got some good perspective, and thank you for the compliments. I'll take those with me for the rest of the week. I think you just built me up for at least a week, maybe a month even.
Well, it's I think I've been working I've been working 36 or so years, and there are even times when I feel like, I'm not doing a good job. So that's just a human thing to not feel confident. But you remind yourself that I remind myself of my accomplishments and how I can be successful and powerful at work, and that's what builds my confidence, and I'm sure it will continue to build yours. So any parting thoughts, Nicole, on what you want to share with us about your journey and how we can be better for you as leaders in the workspace?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm speaking externally to say a CEO at a company somewhere, I would say, I think someone began to touch on this, but we are looking for leaders, not, bosses. So, to the extent that you can create a meaningful vision that ties to, both financial and, world do good sorts of results, and you can communicate that, share it, rally people behind it, I think you're more likely to find people who are going to come with you on that journey and want to see it through. And I think that is so much more important, kind of, standing there with your whip and kind of bossing folks around, because, as we've really touched on, people can go to different places. And so, what holds people, I don't know that it's free food and bringing your dog to work. For me, that's not a thing. But it certainly is having, results that people can really, step forward and want to be a part of for long term. So you can continue, if you can sustain that long term, I think that's where you get people to, follow behind your leadership.
That's great. So thank you. We're going to be wrapping up the show in a minute. Nicole, how can folks reach you if they're looking to hire you? Because you seem like quite the professional.
Well, I live in New Jersey, so keep that in mind. I actually have 3 little kiddos, so that's a whole other conversation that I probably need some coaching on. You can email. Actually, you can reach me on Twitter. I have maybe one Twitter post. Maybe I will have more. It's at Nikki_Wally, WALLY.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming to the show. And Robert, any parting thoughts? And let us know how we can reach you.
Yeah, well, so you can reach me as well at Rob DelCampo, DelCampo. I tweet out some nuggets of wisdom and random things sometimes, so feel free to look at me there. I think this is a great discussion, and I'm glad that it went in a positive direction. We have some great examples of some millennials really doing great things, which is really the majority of folks. So I think we just need to remember that, the time-tested, good management practice teachings that we've been teaching in business schools for 60 years are good and they work, and we forget about them sometimes. And millennials, yes, they're special, and people want, they want to be told that they're special, as Lorne, you mentioned, hey, you like to remind yourself of all the great things that you've done, but that we're all more similar than we are different. But we also have to remember that we're kind of communicating cross-culturally when you think about what shaped people of different generations. And I think we'll figure it out. So I think we've had some great positive demonstrations of how millennials really want to be seen and really want to do good work as we move forward.
Great. Thank you so much for being on the show. And Joey, any parting thoughts, and how can folks reach you?
Sure. Folks can reach me on the social media. My Twitter and Instagram is Joey V. Price HR. Company website is jumpstart-hr.com. It's been a great discussion, Lorne, Dr. DelCampo, Nicole, Alex. And I just want to say that we'll post the resources that I talked about on the website there. But I want to say specifically that, if you're listening and you're a leader, if you're a manager, the biggest takeaway is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And if you can become a better manager, then you'll have better employees, regardless of their age range or demographics. And if you should also reflect on whether or not you are a customer or a manager. Are you just expecting deliverables from your employees, or are you investing in them and leading them towards the goals that you have for them?
Awesome. That was great. And Alex on our show, I think now for the second or third time.
Yeah. Probably the second, but I'm not sure either.
Well, the news articles.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So maybe the fifth time. So got any parting thoughts?
I mean, just everyone wants to have the same thing. Everyone wants to have a stable job. Everyone wants to have a stable income. Everyone wants to be led but not forced to, or told exactly like what to do and feel like they're confined. So, I mean, I think just being able to express yourself and being able to give and take criticism, give and take ideas is a good resource to have.
Awesome. Hey, how can people reach you? Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter. I don't use it. I'm not sure. My handle's probably just Alex Pascasello.
You don't even know what it is?
No, okay. I don't really use it that much.
Well, I'll tell you what I want. I want you guys to work for as long as possible to fund my Social Security. That's what I want. I really appreciate y'all coming on the show, and thank you for the time, Robert, Nicole, Joey, and Alex. You've been listening to You're Hired here on 96.7 FM. We broadcast each Monday at 10 a.m. to learn how you can have a joyful job and satisfying career. If you want to be on the show or have an idea, you can call me at 240-876-0276 or reach me by email at lorne@electriccow.com. I want to thank my production assistant, Alex Pascasello, for being the production assistant and on the show, and also the always amazing Afote Odai, who's our production engineer. He's just kind of the silent guy. Yeah. He says, yeah. And listen to us next week here on You're Hired. Thanks very much.